Hey, so good evening everyone. I'm here chatting to Paul Murphy. If you don't know who Paul Murphy is, he is a TD within the Dáil right now. And TD is a member of People Before Profit. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself a small bit?
Sure.
Other than that?
Yes, I'm a TD People for Profit for Dublin Southwest. I am our climate and biodiversity spokesperson. I am an eco-socialist. I am in politics because I think the current system works for the very rich, big business, big corporations, big polluting corporations, and it doesn't work for the vast majority of people. And I think we need to turn that on its head.
And I would agree with you. And even today, when we were walking around town, Danielle said something to me. My daughter, Danielle, said, there's a real division of the very rich and the very poor. And it's very clear to see. She's 21 now. She said she never felt it as much as she feels it today. And in your opinion, why are they feeling that more today than they were a decade ago, 2 decades ago?
Yeah, and people are feeling it more because it is actually happening.
Yeah.
Like, that is a real thing. Like,
It
you know,
is.
that is reflected in statistics in terms of becoming more and more unequal. So,
Yeah.
you know, we're this supposedly super rich country. Most people don't feel that way. They're struggling in terms of childcare,
Yeah.
struggling in terms of paying their bills. 1 in 4 parents say they struggle to put food on the table for their kids. And yet there's all this money in the country. Where's it going? It is going to the big corporate landlords, the private developers, the private hospital operators.
Yeah.
And they're the people who get rich out of the crises that affect kind of most people, you know?
And I would kind of hear that a lot as well from people on what's going on in Ireland. I receive DMs on the daily for people.
Yeah.
And it comes to a Wednesday and somebody's like, I can't feed myself for the next 2 days. You
Yeah.
know, I have to feed the kids, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. They're working.
Yeah.
Like, they're
Yeah,
working.
yeah, yeah.
They're doing everything they were told to do. They
Yeah.
went to school, they got the education, they got the job, and now they're struggling.
Exactly.
So-
People come in the door here who are 2 people,
Yeah.
both working,
Yeah.
you know, low paid jobs, kids, and who are now homeless, who
Yeah.
cannot afford to find anywhere to rent. Like, even though they're able to access HAP, and they still can't get anywhere to rent, you know?
And I talk about this from my own point of view quite a lot. My dad worked in a factory
Yeah.
in Shannon 4 decades ago. My mother worked part-time in an office. We had a 4-bedroom semi-detached house,
Yeah.
nice car in the driveway, holiday home down in County Kerry.
Yeah.
My dad played golf on a Sunday.
Uh-huh.
That could not happen on
Yeah,
those
yeah.
salaries today.
Yeah.
You know, so when people say it's the coffee, the Netflix, the this, that, it genuinely
Yeah,
isn't.
the avocado.
It's not the same thing.
Yes.
You know, so it's completely different. So from your point of view, you went into politics to kind of mix it all up a little bit,
Yeah.
change the status quo. And how does that look, or how does that work for you? Like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it works when we have big movements of people, you know?
And we saw that with the water
exactly.
protest.
That
and
was-
you were one of the leading faces of the water protest. I genuinely believe if we didn't have you at that time, we would probably be paying for the water today. So we have to say a massive thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Claire. I mean, I'm not sure that's true.
You were very loud about it.
I was definitely very loud about
Yeah.
it. But certainly, like, the thing that made the difference was the mass movement. You know, the
People
hundreds of
came
thousands of
together.
people on the streets, the 73% of people refusing to pay, the street meetings, the community organisation. There was ordinary people kind of taking control and saying, no, we're
Because
simply
we
not going to
felt
accept it. Exactly.
Water
like,
was
you know?
a human right.
Yeah.
But why don't we see housing as a human right?
Yeah.
Why don't we see general healthcare as a human right? Like, why are we allowing those divisions when we wouldn't allow it with water?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing in terms of housing that like kind of cuts across our ability to have the same kind of movement, but we have to have it. It's the only way we're going to resolve it. But is that like people are affected in different ways. So with water, the bill came in your door, you could not pay. You know, it was kind of very simple. Whereas with housing, maybe you're struggling to buy a house, and they're going up every year, you know, 10% now rising, you're like
Wages
chasing a
aren't going
deposit,
up.
you can't get there. Maybe you're trying to rent a house, maybe you've been made homeless,
Yeah.
maybe you're living in your parents' house. You know, there's different ways, and we need to unify people and say, ultimately, this is all the same. It's
Yeah.
because housing is being organised around profit of the very rich as opposed to the needs of the many. But that, I think that's kind of the challenge that
And
we've
at
had
what
there.
point did that change? Like, when did that change from being kind of everybody could access a home, a basic home, any home, to it now being something for profit and only those who are kind of in the top percentages can afford a home?
I mean, I think there's never been some idyllic time when obviously everyone could get a house or whatever, but clearly the crisis has gotten a lot worse. You know, you knock on doors, people will tell you, oh, I bought this house for, you know, a small amount of money in the past
A
relative
very
to wages.
small amount of money, yeah.
And I think you can basically trace that back to like a global process of neoliberalism in this country stopping building council housing. kind of 80s into the 90s, basically no social housing was built, and then turning housing from something that was primarily about having somewhere to live into a commodity to make profit from. And that is like a global phenomenon, and that reaches kind of the nth degree with like, you know, the setting up of this the REIT structure, the real estate investment trust, basically saying we're trying to attract in big corporate landlords to buy up thousands of properties and pay no tax on them. Because like that's how you deliver housing. That's what the neoliberal model says, and it doesn't work. Like
we
exactly,
see it doesn't work.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think there's a single person in the country right now that doesn't know somebody who's homeless, at threat of homeless, who's struggling to find rental property, who's struggling to buy a house. I know so many people, and like I said, I have two daughters, a 29-year-old and a 21-year-old. All their friends are leaving. They've gone through college, they've got their degrees, they've done their masters. All the talent is leaving. Like, what are we doing? Like, it's insane what we're doing. We're training them, and they're leaving because they see no hope here.
And it's causing like problems in terms of our schools, problems in terms of our hospitals, because in Dublin and in cities in particular, where the housing crisis is the worst, then people simply cannot afford to live there and work on the kind of wages that are there.
But I see it even in the likes of Limerick. You know, the students aren't living in the city because they can't afford to. So they're commuting from, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours away.
Pretty grim, like.
So they're no longer working in cities, which means staying in the cities. So they're not doing the part-time jobs in the cities. They're not socialising in the cities. They're bused straight back out at the end of the day. So they're struggling as well. So everybody suffers from this. So who's benefiting?
Yeah, but that's the point, is that if you look at the profits of the likes of IRES REIT or Hibernia REIT, who are two of the biggest landowners in the state, or apartment owners, thousands each, or the profits of the big private developers, they're the ones who are making money. I mean, rent has doubled over the past 10 years in this country. And so obviously if you're someone who doesn't own a property and rely on renting, that's a real problem. But if you own loads of properties, that's actually a good thing. House prices have gone up. It's like this government makes a big deal of the first time buyers grant, and they try and use that as an attack point against us and others that we want to get rid of it. First time buyers grant comes from, explicitly, from lobbying by the Construction Industry Federation, who said we want this grant in to keep house prices high. That's the purpose of it. The money simply passes through the hands of the first time buyers into the pockets of the private developers.
It's a bit like these
That's what it's
energy
about.
credits. Like they do nothing for us. It just passes through. They could do something about capping profits, and then we would be better off in the long term. But these €125 do nothing for us. We never see the money. It just goes to more big profits.
It passes through your hands into because there's nothing to stop them keeping their prices up.
Thank you so much, government. You've given us a few crumbs.
And new figures came out from Eurostat saying how we have the second highest electricity prices in all of Europe.
And we were one of the cheapest.
And we were the cheapest. Exactly.
So how
we used to be the cheapest, and then we had like liberalisation, as in privatisation. We have an artificial market created. You know.
Yeah.
I recently changed electricity supplier, so every year you have to go and you have to go through it. You have to, you know, and that's the cheapest way to have it.
Yeah.
But my electricity, so I was with Energia, now I'm back with Electric Ireland. My electricity, but it's still coming from the same generator. It's generated in the same place. It's coming through the same pipes. It's arriving in my house in the exact same way, but supposedly I'm with a different company. And it's just an artificial market that's being created and a bunch of profits being siphoned off.
So why aren't we doing anything to cap the profits? Why are we allowing these profits to soar? Like, who's benefiting? Is it just the shareholders that are benefiting?
Yeah, the shareholders. I mean, and that's if you look at all right across in Ireland, but also across Europe, also across the world, there's multiple studies that show if you look at the cost of living crisis over the past few years, 2/3 of that is down to profiteering by corporations. So there was, you know, prices did genuinely rise in terms of oil and gas in particular, and then a bunch of companies were like, this is our time. I mean, we just turn up the prices and increase profits. And
so what can we do? What's the answer?
Well, the first thing to do is to kick out Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael.
Because we have a general election coming up. We don't have a date, but we know it's coming. So what can we do to ensure our cost of living reduces and things get better? Because we had so much excitement and so much hope the last time the election came around.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I feel there's a little bit of, what's the point now?
Exactly. I feel the same. And that's the danger.
We need that energy back.
Yes,
because
exactly.
What can we do?
Yes.
What can we do? How can we get that energy, and how can we get people to see that actually change is possible?
Yes.
And it is good.
I think that's 100% the challenge. Is there's lots of people who say, I voted for change before, it didn't work. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael came together to block it. Okay, that was then. That is what happened. But we have a new election coming. Don't allow the media to write the script of this election. So their script is Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael are going to win the election. The only question is, are they in by themselves, or are they in with Labour or the Greens or someone else? we don't have to accept that script.
Well, it's
right?
hard to believe that's true because I talk to hundreds, if not thousands, of people on the weekly. I don't hear that.
Yep.
I really don't hear that. So I don't know where this thinking is coming from. Is it just an idea we're being sold, or is it real?
I mean, in the opinion polls, they're doing okay. You know, they're declining.
Who are they asking?
And they're well, I think they are.
I'm not being asked.
Yeah, I know. I'm not being asked either. But I think the opinion polls aren't wildly wrong. But what they are wrong about, in a sense, is that like the most people, understandably, don't spend their time thinking about politics.
They don't.
They're worried about getting their kids to school, getting to work. They're under enough pressure.
Yeah.
They don't. And I think when elections are called, things change. Like that happened in 2020.
It did.
And that's what we have to say is possible again.
Okay.
We need people.
Yeah.
The people who are not satisfied, they want those people not to vote. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, delighted. If you say, oh, sure, they're all the same, what's the point? I won't bother voting. We need people to register to vote. They have about a week left to register in an easy way.
Literally daily, I remind people to vote.
Great.
And to register and check the register. Exactly. So people have to
People come out to vote.
Yeah.
People register to vote. Then people come out to vote, talk to others, encourage people to vote. And I would say the best thing to do is to vote people before profit, vote socialist, number one,
I say this
and
all
transfer
the time.
to the left.
I'm really upset that I don't have a people for profit representative in my area. If I did, they would be getting my vote.
You will in this coming general election. So People for Profit is standing, People for Profit Solidarity will have a candidate in every constituency but two. So the two we're not standing in is one of the Tipperary constituencies and Sligo Leitrim. So everywhere else, there will be a candidate.
Okay, well, they will be getting my vote.
So there you go. Thank you very much.
I'm delighted with that. But just to say, the last time around, you done quite well because there was a lot of excitement and you had really been good with the whole water movement. But your areas have changed. Explain that to me. So the people that voted last time around, they can't, if they want to vote for you again, might see that you're not there for them to vote again.
Yeah, so certainly, so in Dublin Southwest, obviously there's been constituency boundary changes right across the country.
But this affects you.
Yeah, in most cases, they have made getting elected slightly easier for left-wing candidates. But unfortunately in Dublin Southwest, the changes have made it more difficult. So the area that we did best in the 2020 election
is now not your area.
Is now moved to Dublin Midwest. So they have the opportunity to vote for Gino Kenny. So that's great.
Okay.
They should vote for Gino Kenny. I'll be delighted if they do.
Well, we need to keep you too.
But exactly, like so they took out our best area and we got 10,000 people left. 10,000 people came in from not the area where we're going to do worst, but it isn't as good as, just on average in terms of who's going to vote. So that means we're certainly under pressure in Dublin South West. So it does mean, if people want to see me re-elected,
in the next few weeks.
they need to vote for me, number one.
We have a lot of doors to knock on Paul in the next few weeks.
We have loads of doors to knock on.
Yeah, and just tell me, a day in the life, what does it look like? When you get up in the morning and you have to go into the door, what does that look like? Is it frantic? Because a lot of people think, oh, they barely work, they're never there, they do not. So tell us what a day in the life looks like.
I mean, every day, someone asked me this the other day, every day is very different, that's the truth.
Yeah.
So you get up early, obviously you're reading the news, you have to be on top of what's happening.
You're reading the news, going to sleep, you wake up in the middle of the night, probably reading the news.
Exactly. I read a lot of news, and I like reading news. So then maybe I'm visiting a picket line or a community struggle or something, people fighting back, trying to assist that, because we're not just about being in the Dáil, we're trying to be on the ground.
Absolutely.
Then you're in the Dáil Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you go into the committee, which is the climate committee for me, or you're speaking in the Dáil on a whole range of different topics.
Can I ask about that? What's it like for you in the Dáil? Because you don't exactly toe the line, let's say. You're quite... Like you do, and I like this because you are that opposition. People go, the opposition do not. You are always opposing. So what's that like? That can't be fun. In the corridors when the cameras aren't rolling and everybody that can't be fun. Are you the black sheep of the Dáil?
and I think the thing is set up to create a social pressure on people. To go along. That is set up. So it's, for example, in terms of the cases of corruption of government ministers, people breaking the code of conduct, owning multiple properties, not declaring it, all this kind of stuff.
And everyone voting confidence and saying, that's fine.
Exactly. And very, very few people, is the truth, pursue those. I'm sure there's lots of people who think it's not good,
but they don't.
But it's kind of uncomfortable to pursue it. And that's like, I've made a point of pursuing it. And Yeah, I mean, some
You
of
don't
them,
like if
some of them
you're-
aren't happy about that. There's no question
if you're
about
trying to
that.
cross
like,
the
you know?
road, they're going to keep driving. They're going to go, he can wait.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny actually because Niall Collins was one of the people who we really pursued, who had multiple properties
Neil
in different
Niall.
names.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
multiple.
yeah.
I saw a meme earlier, just earlier on there
He
about
was
it.
out in Limerick
And,
yesterday with Micheál Mertens.
I can't
What a
remember.
lovely fella he is.
He like confronted me in the Dáil one day about. I think I had a folder under my arm which had his name on it, which had my file on Niall Collins,
Yeah.
you know, and was like, "What's your problem with me?" And I was like, "I told you my problem with you.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you
It's
haven't
not
registered
really
your properties.
a personal
Like,
problem.
it's not personal
He's
at all.
just
Like, you know."
not, like if you're going to lead by example.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You can't ask other people
Yeah.
to do right when
Yeah.
you're not doing right yourself. You know, that's just a given.
Absolutely.
How can you get respect or even have people listen to your point
Yeah.
of view?
And
Is-
if you look at the number of TDs, the number of ministers in this government who have been forced to resign, it's huge. Like it's 6 or 7 were forced to resign
But
for various
interestingly,
things.
they've
You know.
stopped resigning.
Yeah,
now
that's
they
right.
don't care.
That's right.
They do whatever
That's
they
right.
want.
That's right.
And they don't resign
There,
anymore.
there was one. It might have been a Pascal Donoghue. They decided basically it's clear they were going to draw a line.
Yeah.
You know, Pascal
Because
Donoghue.
there'd be nobody left.
Yeah.
That was the problem.
Yeah, and they just decided we're going to hold the line on this one.
Yeah.
And like particularly Pascal Donoghue, because he's like very senior in Fine Gael. He was Minister for Finance. Now he's public
Yeah.
expenditure. But what
And
was
look at our
exposed?
public expenditure.
Yeah. Yeah, but also look at who's getting the money from the public expenditure, you know? So like if you look at the bike shed, that was a company called Sensori. They were originally founded by Michael Stone. He's no longer involved in Sensori. But they got
Yeah.
the contract for the bike shed, got big money. But Michael Stone, the guy who set them up, he's the guy who got the posters put up for free for Pascal Donoghue.
He was.
And like we questioned Donoghue in the Dáil, like his story didn't stack up at all. He had like all sorts of kind of retroactive accounting to say, oh, this much was a donation to the local party, which was just under the limit of what's allowed. This much is a personal donation to me. None of the figures stacked up in reality.
Yeah.
But they just held the line. He
But
held the
this
position.
man done well
and-
then with the contracts.
Yeah, and
I
the
mean,
company has done very well in the
that
contracts.
is-
Yep.
That's so bad.
Yeah.
Like, how is that? How is there no accountability for that?
Yeah, and Fine Gael kind of portray themselves as being like clean, you
Law
know?
and order,
Yeah,
and,
and law and
you know,
order,
yeah.
exactly. Like, you
I
know,
mean, they could be anything but,
yeah,
really,
yeah.
when you look at these things.
Yeah.
You know, and then we have Simon Harris currently
Yeah.
as our Taoiseach.
New energy.
New, like,
That's
honestly,
new
new energy. Like, honestly.
I was on the radio the other day with Colin Brophy and he just kept saying the word new energy. I was like, what? It's like,
I think
is that how
okay.
you... Yeah.
Like, where's that energy? Like, I mean, he signed off on the National Children's
Children's Hospital, that's right.
How has he still got a job?
He
Never
promised
mind.
the kids with scoliosis that they would have operations within months while
But
he
he's
was
very
Minister for Health.
convincing. You know, when
Yeah,
he's
I
on
think that's
camera,
right.
he's very convincing.
Yeah.
He's a great storyteller.
Yeah, I
But
met
he
a woman the other day
follows with nothing.
who said that, like, he was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I can't trust him, you know? And she wasn't like some huge Fine Gaeler, like, but she was,
Yeah.
and it was interesting to get the perspective of just a person who,
He's-
doesn't pay much
he's
attention to
media
politics.
trained well.
Like, exactly.
He's
like.
media trained
But
well.
you're absolutely right, though.
Do you think he's brought new energy? Because I'm not seeing new energy.
Well, it's new energy for what? So I agree
don't
with
know.
you. That's his vibe, is to say like, oh, don't worry, I'm listening to you and I'll take care of it. And the government are now like writing a whole series of post-dated checks, you know, for after the election. So like the Occupy Territories bill, you know, he's like, I think it's terrible. And I'm sure he personally does think it's horrific what is happening in
Does
Gaza.
he?
I'd say he does personally.
Okay.
But they're like trapped into this system, or like trapped. They accept being in the system, they support being in a system whereby we can't go against what US imperialism says. We
Yeah.
have to allow them to use Shannon Airport, we have to allow the weapons to go through Irish airspace. So now they're saying, oh, we'll do the Occupied Territories bill, but not quite yet,
After
not
the
until
election.
after the election, and who knows what version it will be after the election, etc., etc.
We've had many promises pre-elections.
Yeah,
Every
exactly.
TD, everybody promises pre-election.
Yeah.
So what are your promises pre-election, and what will you follow through on? Because I
Yes.
saw you pre-election the last time around.
Yes.
You've stayed very vocal. You've
Yes.
stayed very through. You haven't gone off course. So what could we expect from you if we have you back in government after this election?
Yeah, well, we think there needs to be a left government. So instead of a government that serves the interests of the super rich, the big developers, you know, those who benefit from the crises, a government to serve the interests of those who suffer from the crises. You know, the renters, the people the million people who are waiting on hospital waiting lists, the kids with additional needs, the kids with scoliosis, all those people who are suffering, which is the majority of people,
There are
that
children now
serves
that can't
those
even get places
interests.
in secondary schools.
Yeah.
Like they're
that's right.
They're not even children with additional needs. It's not even that now. It's
Yeah.
just children trying to access
Yeah.
secondary school, which is just madness
Yeah.
altogether.
So a government that kind of takes the side of ordinary people
Yeah.
and is willing to actually take
Who are
on.
they? Who are they? You know, because some people
Yeah.
go Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael,
Yes.
Labour, Green. They don't know who's who. So who are
Yeah.
our left TDs? Who are our left government?
Yeah. I mean, again,
and I know we have some centre,
yes,
leftish
exactly.
and more and whatever, but
Yeah.
how could we get that shift?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
where would we need to place those votes to ensure that shift?
Well, that's where, I mean, still there's time
Yeah.
for, you know, broadly speaking, left parties to come together before the election and
Okay.
still make that appeal. You know,
Okay.
we're always making that appeal to Sinn Féin, to the Social Democrats, the Left
Yeah.
Independents, you know, to say we're going to rule out coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, to give people a clear alternative, to say
Yeah.
a left government is kind of on the agenda, is possible. If we don't get that, then what I would recommend to people to vote, and obviously it's up to themselves 100%,
Yeah, of course.
but is vote for People Before Profit and Solidarity, number one, who are the clearest, you know, the clearest vote to kick out
Yeah.
Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael.
Yeah.
Then for like, there's excellent left independents, people like Thomas Pringle,
Yeah.
Catherine Connolly,
Catherine Connolly's
Joan
amazing.
Collins,
Yeah.
you know, people who are also
Claire
very,
Daly's heading back
very
in.
Claire Daly, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
People who are very, very clear on ruling out coalition, you know,
Okay.
who also stand for, you know, many of the socialist ideas that we're putting forward, and then look for kind of who's next
Yeah.
left, who's next left. And, you know, unfortunately, exactly as you're saying, many people play this game of, it was Labour Party, Pat Rabbitte, who said, "Oh, sure, isn't that what you do during elections? You make promises and then you don't have no intention of doing them. That isn't what we do during elections.
And that's not what you should do.
It's certainly not
we
what you should
register
do.
to vote, we go out and vote, and we hope to get the change that
you
we
should get
need.
what you vote for if they win, like, you know,
Exactly.
rather than getting some other version."
So over the last week or so, I was
Yeah.
telling people I was coming up to have a chat with somebody. Didn't tell them who I was going to have
okay.
a chat with.
Yeah.
But the one thing
I thought you were
that
going to
came
Simon
up
Harris.
more, no, everyone thought it was actually somebody from Sinn Féin. But anyhow, they all think they know me very well. It's gas, isn't it? But one question that came up a lot was, is there ever going to be a time where there's no means test for carers allowance?
Yeah, yeah.
Carers, like, I couldn't tell you the suffering
Yeah.
that carers deal with on the daily. The emails I get, the DMs I get.
Yeah.
I've had phone calls with people, like, they're
Yeah.
at their wits' end.
Yeah.
And they just go, but why is it so unfair?
Yes.
Why is this happening? Like,
Yes.
we're working 24/7 and
Yeah.
it's been means
Free
tested
labour.
against
Yeah.
somebody. But that's what it is.
Yeah.
So would we see
Yes.
that end
Sir.
with the left government?
Certainly, we 100% promise, commit, it'll be in our manifesto to get rid of the means test. As you say, it's incredibly unfair. This is
It's so
like, there are
unfair.
billions of euros of effectively free labour done overwhelmingly by women in this country
And we
to
have
care for
money.
people.
This is
And we
the
have
problem.
and we have money. And I would say, right, we passed a motion in the Dáil. We brought a motion
Yeah.
about a month ago, which included a whole range of things in terms of carers and additional
Yeah.
needs, in terms of schools, therapists. But one of the things was to scrap the means test. The irony is that passed the Dáil, right? The government allowed it to pass because they don't want to be seen to vote against it. So the Dáil's position officially is to scrap the means test
But
for carers'
they're
allowance.
not scrapping it.
But they're not scrapping it. As of currently, we need to get rid of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, have a left government that would actually commit to scrapping it.
Okay, no, I really like that. And what else would you say to people right now if they give you their vote
Yeah.
on election day, which
Yeah.
might be the end of November, beginning of December, or somewhere in around that time, what are you going to do for them over the next 5 years?
Yeah. I think, I mean, the number one crisis for people that comes up with us is the housing crisis. It's getting worse, right? So there was about 6,000 people in emergency accommodation when Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael effectively came to power together in 2016.
Yeah.
That went up to about 10,000 by the time of the last general election. That's now close to 15,000,
And the only
right?
reason it's not more is we don't have more emergency accommodation.
exactly.
There's waiting lists now to enter
There's-
the emergency
That's right,
accommodation.
that's right.
So that number is highly unlikely to ever
it's-
rise much more.
Even though
they
it
don't-
still is, but exactly, it's a
but they
massive,
don't
it's a massive
count.
understatement of what's happening.
Because they
But
don't count many
all-
of the homeless.
All of that, the reason that it's getting worse is because the government is committed to a policy which prioritises the profit of those who own loads of property over the needs of the rest of us. So what we need to do, and what a left government would do, is a state construction company to build public homes and public land. I mean, people, in a very simple way, people understand that, like, large parts of Tala, for example,
Yeah.
were built by the state,
Yeah.
providing housing. That isn't happening now. When we're a rich country, when we weren't a rich country
has
now,
to happen.
it has to happen. That is the only way we're going to actually get to the bottom and deal with the
And
housing
that's where
crisis.
we'll have teachers back in schools,
Exactly.
nurses back in hospitals, a functioning society. Because right now it's really not.
Exactly.
We're creaking at the seams everywhere you look. So that's what we could get from you, Paul.
Yes.
So that's what we need, guys. We need people for profit. We need people for profit solidarity, and we need Paul Murphy post the next general election, guys.
Thanks for being clear.
You're very welcome.